is a Skybolt firewall, and I'm showing all this tonight because I think I'm going to spend tomorrow working on this. I'm going to go ahead and do a soft mount on this. So what you got is a solid aluminum engine mount mounted to this fuselage. So now I'm going to jack this out just a little bit and put a rubber grommet with a washer around it to help stiffen up the grommet. You want to put rubber in there, but you don't want to make it sloppy. If you look, a lot of these soft mounts that are on the market makes it sloppy. You got to think about the engine torque. When you mount an engine mount, you want to be down and to the right, sitting from the cockpit. Okay, looking at the engine from the cockpit, you want to be down and to the right. 2 degrees down, 2 degrees to the right, in order to pick up some of the torque of the engine and this thing's going, because it's got a natural pull to the left and a natural pull up, just because the blade's dragging air. The blade is actually grabbing air, so it's got a natural tendency to go that route. So, not only do you have to think about the fact of that, but you also have to get in consideration of, if it's too soft, say I just glued this thing on here, the torque would eventually twist it right off. Okay, I didn't put any screws in through the firewall, I just glued it to the firewall. Eventually the torque of the engine, the vibration would just tear it off. Put the screws in there, now it stops it from tearing off, but now it's transferring the vibration to the fuselage. So we're going to put some rubber in between the motor mount and the fuselage. And then we're going to drill up the motor mount so we can get some rubber in there, and we're going to surround the screw with some rubber, and then the head with some rubber. So now the screw is totally encased in rubber, and the motor mount will be totally encased in rubber, and we're not going to worry about the blind nuts. The blind nuts, I just got those right to the back of the fuselage. Blind nuts in the Trainer 60 are surrounded in rubber, and I kind of think that's probably picking up some of the torque. You gotta, I guess you have to do a little bit of physics in that, and if you have too much rubber in that and too much torque, you're eventually just gonna, the engine's gonna, you're not gonna have a straight line of thrust anymore. That's really what you're after. You want to maintain a straight line of thrust, but you do not want to lose it by going too soft to the engine mount. So it's a compromise. The fuselage is going to absorb some of the vibration of the motor, and it's going to be stiff enough to keep it on a straight plane. How's that? Does that sound good? Okay, so tomorrow morning we're going to get up and we're going to go ahead and try and design one. It should be rather quick. I should probably have it done tomorrow rather easily, due to the fact that I've already designed one and I already have an idea what I got to do. I could buy one for probably 15 bucks, but a true modeler tends to build a lot of his own pieces. I mean, it tends to make it cheaper. You get a little bit more satisfaction out of the fact that you did it yourself. Like today, I installed a switch on this Skybolt here, a simple $3 switch, which I put on my Trainer 60 handmade. It took me probably 3 hours to do it, but it was mine, damn it. It was mine. I built it from scratch, so it was mine, and it's waterproof. So I could either spend 15, 20 bucks on a soft mount for this, or I'll design it myself, and I believe I'm going to design it myself just for the fact that I know I can do it, and it'll save me 20 bucks. 20 bucks is another 18 pack over at Jay's anyway.
Day 63. We're still sitting at the tables of talking, so life could change at any moment. This is my soft mount. This is how I do my soft mounts. This is my second soft mount. I got a new magazine today and they had a whole mess of soft mounts in there, and you're talking ranging, I think, anywhere from 10 all the way up to $30. Each one is different. Each need is different. If you make your own, such as I have, like on this one here, I use fuel tubing, which is fuel proof. You got to keep in mind anything you use in that fuel compartment or around the engine is going to have to be fuel proof to last. I'm still not quite sure how well these grommets are holding up in the Trainer 60. I think they're still doing pretty good. What this is, most of this hardware I've got right out of Ernst, the hardware store. Those are plastic plumber's washers. And then the center of them, I've drilled the center up to around 310. I don't know what the hell that would be, really. Just big enough to get the grommet in there. That way when you squeeze down on you bolt this down, it's not going to completely smash your rubber grommet. The plastic in between will pick up some of the load and it will keep it stiff. And the center of that grommet just happens to be the same size as fuel tubing, which is 250 or a quarter. So you can fit that through there. And then I've drilled up my motor mount holes to quarter or 250. And this has already been installed on the airplane, so now I'm just going to kind of add all this. Seeing the fuel tubing will slip right through the center of that. And then I have another grommet that I'm going to put on this side. And then I'm going to cut off the excessive fuel tubing. This is going to butt right up against the firewall. And now when you put your screw through the center of this, you're going to put it through the center of the fuel tubing. It'll expand, tighten everything up, and now this screw, as it goes through everything, is going to be totally encased in rubber. That's basically what you're doing. You're isolating the engine mount from the bolts that screw it down to absorb the vibration. I went a little farther than this on the Trainer 60, but this ought to be sufficient on the Skybolt. I think I went overboard on the 60. My nut plates that are in the firewall of the 60 have rubber grommets as well. On the Skybolt, they don't. And from what I'm seeing mostly on the market, that's the way everybody's going. Nextly, as for this particular, now you got to keep in mind this one right here, we're looking at this aft, or you can look at it from the cockpit. And what your this one here is going to have to be jacked, so I'm going to add one more washer to the firewall. I'm going to actually screw this to the or glue this to the firewall, and that'll give me, looking down on this is the engine looking down. Actually, it should be this one, because you're tucking right, left. Okay, so it'd be this corner here. We want to jack this firewall. When we screw it down, we want to jack it down about 2 degrees and over 2 degrees. And that's what this washer pretty much, it'll give you about what you need. And this counter reacts the pull of the motor, pulling this way and pulling up because of the prop and the torque of the motor. So you're going to overcompensate the fact that this thing's going to want to pull over to the left and up. So you're going to clock it to the right and down. Just 2 degrees, nothing drastic. So when you do this, you're adding some thickness. You're actually pulling this motor mount away from the fuselage. So again, go to Ernst and pick up some really nice, they got nice machined screws over there, and these things are like 18 cents a piece. They got beautiful hardware selection over there, really cheap. You want to get them too long. That way, if they are too long, you can cut them off. But if you end up buying them and they're too short, then you got to go back to Ernst. So I always buy about a half an inch too long, just to make sure, because they cost almost the same. And then if it's too long, cut it off. You got to keep in mind now, these screws, when they come through the back side of the firewall, I'm getting too close to the camera. These screws get too far through that firewall. Your fuel tank's on the other side of this. Okay, your fuel tank. If your fuel tank hits this, it's gonna trash your fuel tank. So you want to have just enough thread, but not too much. And that's why I showed you earlier, I was blocking my fuel tank. Put a block in front of that fuel tank to keep it a specific dimension away from the firewall. That way, that block of wood in between. Here, I'll just show you the fuel tank. So you got a block of wood on the front here, a block of balsa. And it keeps, not only does it keep my vent and my hookups away from the firewall, or keeping it from smashing into the firewall, but it's also going to keep me a specific dimension from the firewall, so my motor mount screws will probably come out right in here somewhere. And they should never make contact. Should never make contact. So we're going to put this together and see what it looks like. Alright, there you go. One homemade soft mount. I'm not sure how long that took me. Would that take me a couple of hours anyway? And that soft mount setup right there would cost you $15 to $30. And the hardware for you to make it, if you got the gumption to do it, $5? Not even. Not even. I'll bet you would probably spend around $4 for all the hardware. And just put it together yourself. Each one gets a little bit different. You look at the firewall, I have the thrust washer already installed on that upper corner. You want to make sure you get that on there and don't space that out. Okay, so we're looking at the airplane forward side of the firewall, looking aft. It's the upper left hole from the cockpit side. So I probably just confused the hell out of that. Remember, from the cockpit, sitting in the cockpit, looking forward as if you are the pilot flying this thing, sitting in the cockpit, you want your engine to tilt to the right 2 degrees and down 2 degrees. So you want like a down and to the right 2 degrees on both. Don't get too drastic. I have one model here that's so drastic it flies like a dog. Depends on the motor, the size of the motor. I would say you might want to beef it up. Maybe go to 3-4 degrees, but don't go much farther than that. I mean, then your plane starts flying weird just because your engine's installed weird. So that's it. Now all I have to do is just screw this baby on there. And it's Miller time, man. This thing's coming really close to an end. Here's a blind nut. I got a blind nut on the end of that one right there to give you an idea. That's just a... I don't know if the camera will focus on that. That's pretty close. Doesn't like the light either. Looks a little softer. Well, anyway, you can see that's what's on the back side of the firewall. That's what's inside these firewall on the back side. It's a nut that's got teeth on it, and when you tighten it down, it anchored itself, and you glue it to the firewall, and you anchor it into that firewall. So when you tighten it down, it's pulling against itself. That's just one version of a lot of things you can do, but anyway, let's move on. Okay, and then there's the soft mount installed. And then when you go ahead and permanently install this thing, take note of your dimensions, the screws, what they look like, lengthwise and all that kind of good stuff. You want to keep an eye on these so they don't vibrate loose at the same time as they're supposed to pick it up, and you don't want the rubber to disintegrate either. It's an experimental, just like anything, it ain't gonna last forever. So when you go ahead to install this, you want to install this motor mount permanently before you install the fuel tank. And you want to kind of backtrack yourself. Make sure nothing's going to touch anything as you permanently install everything in the plane, because once this is all hooked up and the tank is installed, that tank is basically installed in there to never come back out, but you don't trap it in there to an extent that it can't come out after you ditch the plane or loop it or whatever the hell term you want to use. Okay, onward. Alright, here we are, day 63 still. We're looking to watch the 6:30 news, see if we're still at the tables. We are still at the tables talking. What I have now is I had a little bit of fine-tuning to do on the landing gear before I actually considered landing gear complete. I'm going to paint this landing gear versus, I don't know if you see the pretty landing gear I put on the Trainer 60 over here. I left that as polished aluminum, and I had drilled holes in it to try and save some weight. Those are homemade brackets. It took me a considerable amount of time to do those because I did those with the floats. Can you see the back ones too? Took me a little while to do those, but I left those polished. So they're a little bit finer than these. These here are the Skybolt is going to be painted. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to finish the belly block. I didn't have, the belly block was on, but it was tacked on. I don't remember if I said that at not when I did that at that time. It's probably been a while since then, since we're talking 63 days into building this model now. But all I have to do now is I polished the landing gear top and bottom with about an 80 grit sandpaper at first. I did a leading edge cut down on it. The leading edges are aerodynamic, or I don't know how the hell you would actually say that. You see they got a knife edge on them now. They don't have a blunt flat edge anymore. They have a knife edge. That makes them a little more aerodynamic, a little less drag. You don't want a hell of a lot of drag. You know, the less drag you got, the better your plane flies. So landing gear I can almost consider complete now. Is what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead. I have them fine-tuned. I'm happy with the way they look, the way they're actually looking right now. So I'm going to install the belly block, finish the belly block, which all I have to do is just glue it back in there. Once it's dry, I'm going to go ahead and do some body filling, make sure things look smooth, and landing gear will come back off, and I'll probably put a nitrate dope, a couple of nitrate dopes on it to give it a smoother look, a finer look, and that way the butyrate, when I go for the color coats, will stick right to it. So you know, almost landing gear's done. Fuselage is basically done. I think I'm just about ready to cover this fuselage. Keep in mind, I still have 2 wings with ailerons that are not cut out, and I have not covered them. So I still have to cover the wings and have to still basically just cover the wings, because the ailerons, as I cut the ailerons out, it'll all become part of the process. You'll see that. But fuselage is just about done. I'm just about ready to go ahead and start covering everything up. I have it sometimes seen the vise in the background, but this is, my hobby room is very tight, and you don't have to have a big room to have a hobby room. This table here will break down in
just by taking some screws out. I've had this table tucked in this corner here for about 5-6 years. I've built almost every model in this room on this round table here in the corner. When I need a vise, I have holes drilled in the table that I just use lug bolts and just bolt it right down the damn table, and when I'm need it out of the way, and it doesn't have to be out all the time, just unbolt it from the table and take it off and put it back away. Vise is a good thing to have, especially like doing landing gear, drilling some serious shit, like when I was drilling up the motor mount for doing the soft mounts. Comes in handy. I take a picture of this just before I do it. This is how I'm going to secure the body block to it. I'm going to just do a face seal on the bottom of this body block with some 5-minute epoxy. I'm going to stick that thing in there, and that thing will not only adhere itself to it, but it'll fuel-proof that portion of the landing gear, so I won't have to worry about doing a nitrate dope. I think the 5-minute epoxy probably stick better to the aluminum than it would to the nitrate dope. And I've covered up the screw heads. This thing is completely where I want it, so now I'm going to match it up in there to the belly, let it set up, and then I'm going to peel it back off, see how it sets, do some body shaping, and then I'll take the landing gear back off and I'll give it a couple of coats of nitrate dope and consider landing gear done. And then, hell, let's not talk about that right now. Remember what the point of this was supposed to be. This is how I'm going to do this. This is how I do a lot of things. This hobby is very, very creative. That's why I've slowly got hooked and hooked and hooked, and now, damn, man, I have a ball doing this. You can do miracles with masking tape if you just take your time, and I've done miracles with masking tape. 5-minute epoxy does miracles too. I mean, it does anything from adhere to fill holes to fill gaps, anything. So I just thought I'd take a shot of this just before I do it.